What's up? My name is Miss Peer Editor, and today's topic is types of rhetorical devices to analyze for the SAT essay. The SAT essay requires you to read a passage and analyze specific rhetorical devices that the author uses in that passage. And the first type of rhetorical device to analyze is what I like to call a content-based device, which describes what the author is saying. And a great example of this is a counterargument. So a counterargument is an opposing opinion that the author uses to bolster her own credibility. And it shows that the author knows the topic well enough to see the issue from many sides. It also makes the reader more likely to trust what the author is saying. Here's an example. Although uniforms in school may reduce peer pressure, they prevent students from expressing themselves creatively through clothing. So the first part of the sentence describes the counterargument, and in the second part of the sentence, the author refutes that same counterargument. Some key words to note in the passage to find a counterargument are although, however, despite, on the other hand, nonetheless, nevertheless, or any other word that indicates an opposing opinion. Second is rhetorical questions, and that's just a question for the reader that's included in the passage. Make sure to scan the passage for a question mark if you're trying to identify this device. And what a rhetorical question does is that it piques the reader's interest and draws him into this discussion. An example of a rhetorical question is, should parents limit screen time for kids? It's just as simple as that. Number 3 is evidence, and that can be anything from facts to statistics, or numbers, percentages, or fractions. And evidence increases the author's credibility because he's presenting undeniable information. An example of evidence would be, the ocean is filled with over 100 million tons of plastic. If the author were writing an article about marine litter, this could potentially strengthen his argument. Another type of rhetorical device is an anecdote, and that's a personal story or moment that the author uses in the passage. And it's more relatable for the reader to read an anecdote rather than just a list of facts. It creates a personal connection between the reader and the author, and also instills empathy in the audience. For example, if the author describes the time he visited Antarctica to see emperor penguins, that would be an anecdote. And some key words to look out for are memory, recall, past event, and remember. Next is juxtaposition, which is a technique that the author uses to contrast two different images or concepts. And a really good example of this is a quote from A Tale of Two Cities, which was written by Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. And it goes on like that. And what makes this quote and other examples of juxtaposition really effective is that it catches the reader's attention. And some examples of contrasting images are fire and water, knowledge and ignorance, good and evil, Harry Potter and Voldemort, and so on. Satire is a rhetorical device that describes a social commentary on the true nature of an issue. And satire doesn't always need to be laugh-out-loud funny. Some authors use irony to create satire, and this occurs when the opposite of what is expected happens, or the author says something but actually means the opposite. And sometimes authors do use humor to depict satire. Just look at any political cartoon. With content aside, now let's look at a style-based rhetorical device. And this describes how the author uses language to make his point. We'll run through a couple of examples of figurative language. Metaphors are comparisons between two objects or concepts without using the words like or as. And a simile is that same comparison, except it uses the words like or as. Personification gives human characteristics to an inanimate object. So if I were to say, the stars blinked in the sky, that would be an example of personification. Alliteration uses successive words beginning with the same letter. So an example of that would be, Sally sells seashells by the seashore. And hyperboles are exaggerations. And an example of that would be saying, it took centuries for the computer to reboot, when in reality, it only took me 5 minutes. Imagery is a common device that uses descriptions to appeal to the 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. And imagery is really effective because it transports reader to the place that the author is describing, or it allows the reader to picture the image in her mind. Some key words to look out for when trying to find imagery in the passage are descriptive adjectives, such as colors, scents, textures, etc. Repetition is a common device that authors use especially in speeches, and that's when an author repeats the same word or phrase a few times to create emphasis. Another device is tone, and that refers to an author's attitude towards a subject. It indicates emotion, as you can see in the examples that I've listed here, but it's important not to confuse tone with diction, which is word choice, and that refers to the writing style of the author rather than emotion. So for example, if the author uses casual words, maybe the diction is colloquial, and if the author uses vivid, lush descriptions, maybe the diction is flowery. As always, please subscribe for more videos, comment below, tell me what other rhetorical devices have you found on an SAT essay passage. You can see my last two videos here. I recently made one about common mistakes to avoid on the SAT essay, so if you found this video helpful, you might want to check that one out. I will see you next time.